Welcome to episode 58 of Reading Between the Reels. I'm Craig Dickinson. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please tell someone about us. Send a tweet, post to Facebook, write a review in your favorite podcast catcher, or just recommend the show to a friend. Today on the show, I'm joined once again by Corey Heitschmidt. What's up, Corey?
Hello.
And today we are talking about Knives Out from 2019. Written and directed by Rian Johnson. So, Corey, let's talk about Knives Out. What are your some of your overall thoughts on Knives Out?
Craig, I think this movie is fantastic. After the second watch, the first time I watched this movie, I thought it was a great movie. Liked it, enjoyed it. Getting ready for this show, I was like, okay, yeah, this will be a great one. I'll enjoy watching this one more time. And then watching this movie, I got to tell you, I think there's so much in here. There is absolutely an incredible story. It's a modern whodunit story, murder mystery, but it's got humor and incredible levels of details and too much to keep track of. I'm going to say that. Too much details to even keep track of, which is what makes it a good rewatch, right? If you can see a movie and think this is going to be a good rewatch so I can pick up more, then you know you're doing a good job. And then it's got a great little plot and plot twists and setups and who's involved. And so I think this is definitely a deep movie, a dark clue type whodunit movie, but the humor and the details just keep you interested and entertained.
Yeah, I'd have to echo a lot of that. I mean, full disclosure, this is a movie that Matt Leader loves, co-creator of Reading Between the Reels, loves this movie. And so we're going to do this movie because the new one's coming out, Glass Onion, will be out by the time this episode drops. And I've only seen the movie once before I did this and was just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I see what they're doing. But this time through, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this movie. I need to buy this movie because it works so well on repeated viewings, like you mentioned. It does such a good job of just showing and not telling, which is fascinating, especially when you're trying to keep track of all the cinematic elements. But I had such a hard time doing that because I was also trying to track the plot at the same time. And usually I watch movies in chunks just so I can spend a little bit more time doing analysis, but I couldn't turn this one off. And it took me at least another hour to watch because I kept pausing and having to write things down as it was going because I was so engrossed in trying to keep track of everything that was happening. So I'm definitely a fan. I'm excited about the new one.
It's interesting you said pausing it and then writing things down because I thought the part where I said too much details is what I was experiencing. I think, we always have some things that we're going to talk about on the show that we know, and we start to write those down. But with this show, I started to look and say all the things, like there's too many things to work. The camera, the music, the sounds, the details in the back, the slow fades, just a slight tinge of music, to set the stage. I mean, it really is an incredible level of detail that Rian Johnson put together in this. And so I think with that, you have to go in here knowing you're going to miss a few details in it, and you're going to focus on the characters and the plot. And I think that's what's going to make it great.
Yeah, so let's start talking about some of those things with cinematography, composition, color, camera work. You want to go ahead and start us off what you noticed for those things?
So I'm going to say in the beginning, the camera work, there's a lot of setup with the knives, the big circle of knives that they have inside the house. And whenever they're doing the interviews and the interrogations in the beginning, setting up the people, the camera always has them off to the side and shows this circle of knives. And the thing about that circle of knives is it ends up being part of the show later on. Spoiler alert, we're probably going to talk about that later. But as they set it up in the beginning, they're going to come back to it in the end. And that knives shots with the cameras are just great. All the people, the family members, the Thrombies are off to the side. But then Marta, when she gets interviewed, she's in the dead center of the knives. And so I think just small things like that that get the viewer to kind of look and think this is behind you. This is something important. So I think they do some of that. I think the scene and the way they pan for a couple of the scenes, they do some close-ups and then they show back to set up this cold, reclusive mansion looking thing. That looks like a mansion that had been in a generations of family and never been updated. It's real 1920s looking. Almost a Sherlock Holmes type looking mansion timeline. So I think with that camera work, they do so great about going in on the character and then also showing an entire scene panning back, and your eyes naturally go to everything in the room. Knives, swords, skulls over here, like skull and some of the artwork and things like that, all setting up small subliminal things of what's taking place in the scene. So I think the camera work is great.
Yeah, there's so much with this that I was having a hard time keeping track of. Like I mentioned, it starts with this really striking shot of the house from this low angle, when it makes it look foreboding, like something bad's going to happen there. And then you have this extreme close up of the coffee cup, which we'll talk about in props as well. But now's a good time as any. The "my house, my rules, my coffee" cup. You see that right away, so there's something important with that. And I always look for geometry. There is triangles in this one. There's a great one in the interview section where you have Benoit Blanc at the apex. He's in the very background, kind of out of focus essentially. And it's funny because he's there the whole time, but until he actually says something, it's really easy to miss him.
Well, and they allude to him with the piano. He
Yep.
keeps hitting the piano keys, and it takes the third interview before someone goes, "Excuse me, who are you?" and points him out. And so I think that's a great little introduction to him.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when they do that opening shot of the I guess that's the library. It's really slow and it's really wide angle, and you can actually see him if you're looking carefully on the far right. You can see at least his legs a little bit, so he's been there the whole time. And I had to go back and like, was he there? Because I don't see him enter, but yeah, he was there the whole time.
In an interesting shot, because that the detective is interviewing, and Daniel Craig's in the background, blurred out like that. Mm-hmm. Is that you also get a kind of a opposite shot when Harlan looks over at the knife that he's eventually going to slit his own throat with. That's all blurred as he looks over towards it. So here's Harlan. He's talking with Marta and they're playing their game and he's explaining things. And he looks over at the knife, and as it comes into the camera view, this is going to be part of the story. And he grabs it and takes it out and looks at it. Right. But at the whole beginning, it's blurred in the foreground, right in front of the viewer to set its stage. And nice. I think it's kind of a nice contrast to that.
Yeah, and speaking of contrast, I also love that there's differing takes of Harlan getting his cake during the interviews. They're like, well, this is what we did. And then the first time you see, Richard and Linda on either side of him, again, triangle. And then when Walt's telling the story, it's Walt and Donna on opposite sides. And neither one of one of those is not true. But that whole interview sequence, you're getting seeds of truth, different point of views, and you're really getting to see who these characters are just by what they say.
Yeah. That whole beginning scene with the interviews sets up the beginning of the movie really well, because I think I noticed was it put the name of the character on there, and the interview at first you're kind of hearing them go from one to another, but then some of the conversations start jumping with some of the flashbacks. So it's almost as if they're all having the same conversation and he's saying the same questions to each person, which he is in an interview, but it starts flashing between the characters as you get further into that interrogation part. And so I think they do a great job of kind of summarizing, setting up the story for the viewer without making it seem too unnatural. Like this is very out of place, like here, let us summarize what's going on. Let's set the stage for what's going on and bring the viewer in as if they're part of the detective team.
Exactly. So it rewards you for paying attention, which I always love when movies and TV shows do that. And so you get things like, speaking of color, real quickly, there's kind of a muted color palette when it's in the flashbacks. So you can immediately tell, whether we're in the interview, which is happening essentially in real time, for the story, and then when it's backing, so you can kind of, oh, okay, this is earlier, this is what they're talking about, and then I notice things that are different in everybody's story while there's a voiceover for that.
Yeah. And it recalled to mind to me of when we did our Lego Batman podcast, which is worth checking out as well. Is remember when Joker was on the plane and he made a comment to the pilots about setting up the movie?
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember what it was called, but it was an actual thing where they set up the movie. They set everything up without having to, with explaining it, but not explaining it. So
Exactly. I did want to talk about a few more things with color too. I mean, the house is essentially blood red, which is a really interesting, like, this is where the murder is going to take place. And then the restaurant that Ransom takes Marta to, I don't know if you noticed this, but it's like almost like a sickly green color. And I'm assuming that's not, they didn't paint it for the, because I filmed a lot of these things on location. They just found a restaurant that looked like that. And so it's kind of this sickly green, and like in some Disney movies, that's like green means evil too. It could be jealousy. It could be a lot of things. I mean, that fits with Ransom's profile. So it's kind of a interesting, very bright and distinctive color.
I didn't notice that. I did notice the color in the hallway when Michael Shannon is confronting Marta about the inheritance, and that little intimidation scene he gives her is the color in the hallway is kind of dark. The camera's tilted slightly just to throw the viewer off balance a little, and I think between just kind of the shadowy, the music, him tapping his cane, all of that fit together. So it's, the color and the hallway and everything.
Nice. Well, as far as camera work, I had tons of stuff for camera work. There's so many interesting things happening with this one. You notice at the beginning, there's just several quick shots of Harlan's books, kind of let us know who he is, like that he's an author. You get that filled in really quickly. I mentioned the slow zoom into the library already, which is great. You get that extreme close up of Benoit Blanc playing the piano key. You just see his finger. And then you have a couple of, I thought, really interesting low angles. There's one where, for kind of the first time that he's talking, he's sitting in a chair, and yet it's at a low angle. The camera's basically on the floor looking up at him, so that he has prestige and like he owns the room even though he's sitting down, which I thought was fascinating. And you can kind of parallel that with when Marta shows up at the house after Harlan has been killed. She comes in and she's talking to Jamie Lee Curtis's character, and the camera's at a low angle, kind of looking up at her, like it's straight at Linda when she opens the door. But then as soon as Marta walks through the door, it switches to a low angle. So it's kind of looking up at Marta. So she has this level of respect that we're supposed to give her.
One more camera thing that stands out to me was right after the will reading and the chaos that ensues as Marta's trying to leave to get out to her car. That was the first time that I noticed the cameraman must have been on a shoulder mounted camera at that point, because the camera had a slight jerky motion, as you're walking.
Yep.
And it coupled together with everything they did. They had the sound, they had the piano, the music in the background was chaotic. Everybody's screaming lines at the same time. And so there's this chaos, and the camera's panning around her as she's trying to get into the car to disorient you. And then the camera is must have been a shoulder mounted cameraman, so that it just creates a little more chaos into the scene as your eyes are like, wait, I'm trying to focus on her and through everything else. And so I think it's a great way to, like you say, to kind of bring in the camera work to help set the scene even better.
Yeah, it's a great catch. I had that one as well, so I'm glad you brought that up. A couple other things I wanted to pull out. There's some great extreme close-ups. You have one on Marta's shoe with the blood drop, which we find out later that Blanc did see. And then you have the close-ups on the meds, the morphine and the ketorolac, which is great foreshadowing. You see that before she injects him, and then you also see it later when you kind of get the reveal. And then you have this really cool camera move where camera turns like 90 degrees when Ransom attacks Marta and they fall to the floor, and the camera follows them so that they still look like they're vertical, even though they're both lying prone on the floor. I thought that was really fascinating. Anything else for cinematography before we move down to sound?
I'm going to say the very beginning opening shot, Craig. The slow motion of the two dogs running with the mansion in the background, and there's a fog. It's a cloudy night, and there's a fog moving, and it's all slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of looks. You look at it and you think that's a scary looking house. This is a reclusive place, and it's a mansion, and it sets the whole stage. So that camera work in that beginning and the coloring with it, it kind of sets the traditional detective story. It was a dark and stormy night kind of setup.
Yeah, that's a great catch. Yeah. As far as sound goes, to move down there, I mean, we can't move too far beyond the creaking of the stairs to Harlan's attic, because that's such a crucial sound effect that everybody's story is tied to that as far as timing goes.
Yes, I think the sound in this whole movie is incredible. The very beginning, it disoriented me at the beginning because there was, as the movie company logos are playing, there's a static sound, which at first I was thinking one of two things. It's either static or it's an ocean, right? And you hear the couple dogs barking, and it threw me off like, oh, are we by the ocean? As you start to watch it. And then the moment the mansion appears, you get a loud jump scare from music to kind of make you jerk awake a little bit, like, oh my gosh, like it jumped right out to you, and it's slow motion. And as the dogs are running by, they're coming in slow motion, but then immediately the music and changes into a hurried violin pace, and here's Marta, getting her tea and everything ready, and then running with the platter up through the long house, going up through the stairs, going through the study, going through all these things. And the music of the violin behind in the background sets that up. It sets it up it's a hurried pace. It's feeling quickly. She's rushing through this long house. So I think it's pretty amazing to do all those sounds and set those up, and without any conversation in the very beginning.
Nice. Yeah, the last sound effect I wanted to talk about was just kind of the muffled voices thing, especially in the argument between Ransom and his grandpa Harlan. So you can kind of piece together sort of what they're saying. You can at least tell the tone of the argument, even if you can't tell exactly what's out. There's great sound design just to kind of pull us in, and like you're straining to kind of hear what they're saying because it's important. And later on, of course, we get to hear what they're saying. But as far as music goes, what I found fascinating is that it's Rian Johnson's cousin, Nathan Johnson, who's actually written music for most of his films, which is fascinating. Like, normally you'd think, well, that's nepotism, but the guy's great. And I love the soundtrack for this, kind of this jaunty, playful strings. There's a lot of like high strings, which it kind of takes you back to, like you mentioned, like the Sherlock Holmes thing. And it actually has that feel of, like 19th century London, which is fun.
It does feel that way. It does feel like a older movie. Like you could put this movie in a couple different decades and it fits well. Yeah.
It's kind of this noir sounding orchestral music. I did also want to mention there's some great diegetic music in this film, which is kind of buried in the mix. But if you're paying attention, I think it's hitting us subconsciously, which all good music is doing. A couple ones I wanted to pull out. The song that's playing throughout most of the conversation with Ransom and Marta when he's trying to convince her what to do is a song called Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot. And the song is all about not trusting someone. It's like Gordon Lightfoot writing about like a girlfriend he can't trust anymore, which is interesting because we're not supposed to trust Ransom. Like it's telling us right there. And then that last song that's played, Sweet Virginia by the Rolling Stones, it's playing, and you hear one phrase repeated throughout, and it's got to scrape that shit right off your shoes, which is pretty ironic. Well, no, it's not ironic. It's actually on the nose that this is essentially what Marta's doing. She's like just getting rid of all the Thrombies at this point because they're all scumbags. What about you? Do you have anything for music, or do you want to talk about some vocal sounds? Because I think there's some really good vocal sounds in this one as well.
The music is good because I think They don't really set it up with too much as far as soundtrack songs. It's this great score, a musical score with violins, and I think, but it definitely has a way to set the scene of a murder story. You know, a hurried pace for some chaos in the show, kind of a little slow background. You know, for something where they're sneaking around. I mean, it does a great job of being in the background but not distracting, and then pulling you in. It's a good soundtrack that they do, and with all the sound and the music and everything, they fit together.
Yeah, I agree. I love some of the voiceover in this film. Speaking of vocal sounds, though, you have Harlan explaining to Marta how to get away with accidentally killing him, and then they're showing what she's doing the whole time, all the way through. And I love that she's kind of talking back to the voiceover a couple of times, which just kind of brings you in. She's like, "Really? You want me to do this?" He's like, "No, turn here." Those kind of things. And then at the end, you have Blanc's recitation of how Ransom committed the crime while we see it unfold. That's just brings it all together so quickly. Like, he could just tell us. And again, it's kind of like you mentioned with the Joker and Lego Batman, right? If you just tell me the whole plot, like, I'm tuning out. But if you're showing me and tying those things together and the music's building too, it just makes it fully engaging that way.
Yeah.
Anything else for sound before we talk about performances?
Oh, I'm good for that.
All right, let's talk about performances. You mentioned, we've both talked about it actually, that how the interviews are really kind of showing us characterization. It's really interesting because it brings in exposition, catches us all up and what's happened to this point, who everybody is, but you get these differing takes on everybody, on the events, and on each other too, which is just, it's really good use of dialogue. It's doing so many different things.
The performance of acting is absolutely incredible. You look at how they make this movie. It's a bunch of rich, spoiled family that are just squabbling to get their inheritance. And throughout the whole movie, they set them on, they kind of have this downward talk in how they talk to Marta. Everything they say, you know, she's oh, hey there, kiddo, you know, you're part of the family, you know, all these things. But then the moment anything affects them, they have an impatience in them and they jump straight to the question. So what are you going to do with the inheritance? You know, and so I'm trying to explain here is the moment something affects them, they cannot wait. They have to know the answer right away. So as they're all in there, they're going to hear the will reading in just minutes. And Chris Evans walks in. And immediately they're at each other's throats, and they're immediately wanting to allude to what's going on, what's going to be said. Well, what did he say? What's going to happen? So they don't want any surprises when they get in there. And then when in the hallway, when Michael Shannon's confronting her, his second question to her is, "So what are you going to do with the inheritance?" And then the phone call from Meg is, you know, "I don't know. You just have to do what's right. And I think you should do what's right. I think you should give it back." Like, everything is impatient. Yep. And the moment Meg hangs, and so then Marta says, "Okay, I'm going to, you know, thank you. I'm going to take care of you, Meg." Meg cuts her off and hangs up.
Yep.
Because she got to hear what it is that she wanted. So immediately she hangs up like, "Okay, thank you. Fun." And then gone. And then you look and the whole family's right there all just waiting for Meg on the other end of the line. You know, as soon as she hangs up, they're all in their room together. And so there's just this impatience in the performance of what they do to get those characters, really show them as that elite group that is selfish and self-centered.
Yeah, there's a couple specific quotes I want to get to, but first off, I want to kind of build on what you said, but how they kind of treat her like a kid type of thing. And like she's totally naive and an idiot. You know, there's both Linda and Walt tell her that they wanted her at the funeral, but they got outvoted. And it's like, well, the numbers don't work out at this point. Yeah, the first time it kind of makes sense, and then no, it doesn't make sense anymore. Like, you're both lying. And then I love the fact that none of the Thrombys know where she's from. Like, she's from Paraguay, she's from Ecuador, she's from, like, you mentioned, like 4 different places. Like, you don't even know. You don't know.
I think they say Brazilian nurse at one point too. Yeah.
It just keeps changing. None of them know. But the first quote I wanted to pull out, and then I'll let you go, is Joni Thromby, played by Toni Collette. She's so great in this. She says, "Wait, I read a tweet about a New York article about you," which is when she's talking to Blanc. She didn't even read the article. You find out later Linda did, which, again, characterization. Find it really quickly with just that one line. I read a tweet about a New York article about you. Like, read the article.
Nope. No, because but that makes sense though.
Yeah.
Think about this, because then that family at the big political fun discussion they're having, where it's heated, and they're just going off, and there's left and right and everything in this argument, and it's a bunch of people who don't read the articles; they just read headlines, and then that's how they get together and they start debating each other on all these different issues. It's quite a spirited thing, but it sets up that whole mentality of, and I would say even our society, that we don't necessarily read the articles sometimes. We just read the headlines. Mm-hmm. And then we use that when we go have our educated discussions about things. So yeah, it's a good setup.
You did air quotes there, just so you're quote unquote.
I air quoted that.
Quote unquote educated. Yeah, it's not a video podcast, but
we need to start the YouTube channel.
Any other quotes that you want to pull out? I had just a couple, mainly Blanc ones.
I've got a couple good ones. The one, and I think this is a great, I always love Easter eggs, Craig. I love Easter eggs. I love, tipping the hat, homage, a little paying homage to another show or something that sets up the characters. And one of them, the detective says, "Look around, the guy practically lived in a Clue board."
Yep.
And I thought it was great because you immediately go to Clue. Mm-hmm. And that movie, which is by and far my favorite mystery whodunit show ever. And so I would put Knives Out as number 2 for me because of that. So to get the little tip of the hat to Clue, I think is great. So.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I had that one too.
And then here's the other quote, Craig. When Marta and Ransom are talking in the diner, and he's explaining, and Ransom says, "How did you get this money? What is this about?" And she says, she says that, "What if this has more to do with all of you than it does with me?" Because he's asking, "How did you get this? How did this work? What it is about you that got this?" And she's like, "It's not about me. It's about all of you."
Yeah.
And I think that sets a great little premise for the movie, because she is this timid, kind of beaten down character throughout the whole movie, of a family that says they're family with her, but they're not. And then she starts to kind of gain her confidence later as she goes. So I think it is all about them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. Yeah, exactly. Harlan's not picking her as much as he's not picking them.
Yeah,
which is interesting. The last quote I'm going to leave with is Marta says to Blanc, she says, "You're not much of a detective, are you?" And he says, "Well, to be fair, you make a pretty lousy murderer." Because
that's the next quote I had there, because it's great. They deserve each other.
Yeah, he knew that she didn't do it. He knew there was something else, but he had, as he also says, it's a weird case with a hole in the center, a donut.
A donut within a donut, a hole within a donut hole.
Yeah.
And that, what, you could summarize the whole movie, because in the beginning, you realize they solved the murder. When Marta explains what really happened, right? And we get this little summary, and we know he slit his own throat. So it's a suicide. Mm-hmm. It really is a suicide. It was just she mixed up the things, and this whole thing they worked out. So you've solved the case, but there's more to it. That's the donut.
Right.
And then the hole within the donut hole is the rest of the movie. 2/3 of the movie has to come forward, and there's got to be more here than just what happened with her and Harlan. And so all these people are going to be involved somehow. And so I think it's kind of a great way that summarizes. That's the point. It's we'll solve how he died early, but then we got to kind of get you in there. And so I think it's a great way to set a story within the story.
Yeah. And, that's the thing that threw me off the first time I watched the film, was I wanted to know who killed Harlan. And then they tell you, he killed himself. They show you that. Right. And then from there, it's really, that's not the mystery. The mystery is how did all these people connive to make it look like Marta's not, and what revealing characterization of all these people. And then you get all the stuff that Ransom does. And that's the stuff I need to see multiple times. I need to watch it again because I want to see how badly, he tried to take down Marta. What about body language and facial expressions? Or costumes, hair, and makeup. I had a handful of things, but I want to give you a chance to
I
jump in.
think Chris Evans expressions throughout this whole movie.
Yep.
I mean, this guy, this is Captain America, right? And any movie he's in, one, he looks great. He always looks great. He does a great smirk. And this is a very different acting level for him than what Captain America is in the Marvel movies. I mean, he's got an arrogance here. He's cussing. There's almost a manipulation in how he's talking to Marta and what he's trying to set up. And then there has to be an overconfidence on his part. And his right before the will reading where he's cussing at the family. I won't say the word, but he was supposed to say the F words, but then he ends up saying the eat SH word. And so as he goes around the room and points and says it, it's such a great expression. It is zoomed right up on him.
Yep.
And here's Captain America cussing everyone out. It's such a great thing. And then when they go into the will reading and he's in the very back corner, he knows it's no surprise to him. And as soon as everybody gets hit with they're getting nothing, his smirk, they zoom in on his smirk. And it is such a level of contentment that he throws forward.
Yeah.
So I think when you get that kind of thing, it's definitely banking on a character that's a crowd favorite. Everybody loves him. And then to get him to do some of these facial expressions and these comments and to really get you to go, oh man, this is great acting right here.
Yeah. He's despicable. And, this is his first high profile thing after Endgame. His first post Cap, real big thing after Cap. And he is the anti Captain America in this. And he's so good at wanting us to hate him. Just fantastic. The smug grin is great. I did want to talk about, actually, since we're talking about Ransom, let's talk about like this. His sweater is one of the things that a lot of people will talk about. And this isn't just exclusively me. So there was actually a great interview in People magazine. Costume designer Jenny Egan talked about this, that she added holes and rips to his sweater because of the fact that he's privileged and doesn't care about his stuff. So it's kind of like his little, he's showing disrespect to the family, disrespect to his name and his clothes. That he just doesn't care. Like that's just kind of who he is. This super nice sweater, but that's just him. Like he just doesn't care
until the very end when he loses it all.
Yeah.
And then right before he tries to stab her, and he says, our family home, our family name, our family heritage, our family line.
Yeah.
It's so the great overcompensation. Yeah. You don't know what you have till it's gone.
Yeah. He's trying to, exactly. He's trying to present himself as that devil may care. And then actually he finds out he actually does care quite a bit about it. I did want to talk about, there is one more diegetic song. There's Roxy Music's More Than This that's playing in one of the flashbacks, and you have Joni dancing to it. And then she tries to pull Linda out of the chair, and who just completely refuses, which I thought was hilarious. Like she's trying to dance and trying to pull Linda out of the chair, and she just like waves her off, which again, just a quick little moment of characterization, which is fun. But the biggest thing I have to talk about with costumes is Marta. And just like her frumpy clothes and her hair and everything. And like, it's Ana de Armas and she's nondescript. She's just like this homebody that like no one pays attention to. It's Ana de Armas. It's, which is kind of amazing. Like that she kind of just blends into the background here. Does such a great job.
I think she's a perfect cast for that. She does such a great job of being timid. And I just to her mannerisms, her conversations, and how she carries herself throughout this whole movie as this timid world is swirling around her.
Yeah. Like if you've only seen this, then like, hey, you should at least like see Blade Runner 2049, like very different, or even her in No Time to Die, which, another thing with Daniel Craig, just to kind of see those two actors in two very different roles kind of paired up, and the dynamics just remarkably different. So that's just a lot of fun. One last thing I want to talk about with costumes. Linda, her black glasses and her white hair and she has all these pantsuits. Like she's just all business, which goes back to again that thing with Joni. She isn't going to dance. She's just super serious and very strict. And first time you really see her with Marta too. That the parallels there, like they're so very different. But Harlan picks one of them, not the other, which is interesting.
Just looking at Marta, did you know that her and Daniel Craig reunited in James Bond after this movie?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. No Time to Die.
When you said that, I didn't make that connection that was her.
I know.
And
right?
Oh my goodness. What a great, I don't know, next step I love it when movies like this, you get this movie. And this is one of my favorite things that happens is you get this movie and there's some chemistry here and there's some connection. And then you get them in another movie together and a completely different movie there,
Yep.
But it just shows me, just a level of what they do and that sometimes that chemistry that you feel in a movie is real, that there's a real chemistry there of boy, they would be great friends or they would be, good coworkers or good colleagues or good lovers or, something great that chemistry fits.
Yeah. She blends into the background here really, really, really well. And I think this might've been the first thing I saw her in. And then it was, oh yeah, I've seen her in that, but I didn't remember her, which I guess, that's the point.
Yeah.
That she's supposed to not be memorable. Let's talk about setting and design. I mentioned earlier a lot of this is filmed on location around Boston, Massachusetts. Even the house it's a real house, which is fun, and it feels again. That goes back to like the throwback thing. Like it's not on a soundstage. Like these are all filmed in real places. The Ames Mansion, for instance, in Borderland State Park is for many of the interior shots. It's shot in a real house, so the geography has to make sense. And it does.
Didn't they film it with 3 houses?
Yeah. So they got some other, for exteriors, they got some different places. And then the interiors, because you're going to need to do
and
that.
The house they picked, the inside is really a real house that has been in a generational wealth family and has not been updated, has kept that kind of that traditional look of old mansion.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how much of that, the set decoration was there originally, because that is overwhelming. That's the one thing I had with like all the knickknacks and the lamps and the artwork. Like it's just everywhere. Like it's clearly opulent. It's clearly somebody who has a lot of wealth, but it's like it's cloying. It's kind of claustrophobic in the way that everything is just everywhere and weird stuff, masks and dolls and statues.
Yeah.
So strange.
The Harlan painting, did you notice that was a green screen? It was not completed in time in the painting. And so they had a green screen in there. And then after they took some high res shots of it, after the movie they were done, the cameraman or editors went back and then put it into those shots with Harlan's painting on the wall.
I did not know that. That's great, because it does kind of have an otherworldly quality to it. So like that's be one of the times where like, the imperfection of digital photography actually would pay off.
Yep. And the very beginning, you get a shot of it. And then at the very end, after the murder's solved, Marta's looking at it. He has a smirk after the painting had a smirk after the murder was solved.
You're telling me it's different?
In the beginning, it was a different facial expression.
Oh my goodness. Just one more reason to watch this movie again.
Yep. See, it's one of those, it's like we said, there's too many details for you to see. You have to go back and watch it after reading a couple of the Easter eggs and the little things that behind the scenes. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I did not catch that. And it makes it more rich.
See, listeners, this is why we did the heavy lifting looking for the cinematic aspects. So you can just sit back and catch all the rest of that stuff. There you go.
You're welcome.
I mentioned in props the coffee cup. That's huge because you get to see that at the end. Like it's Harlan's at the beginning and then it's Marta's at the end, and that it's kind of like the passing of the torch. It's officially her house as well, literally.
And and I think that sets up a good thing. Is sometimes in the movies you have to have it set up in the beginning so that you can return to it later. Like you can't just have a random thing. And this is part of the thing with the blood drop on her shoe. Like, did we see the blood drop on her shoe in the very beginning?
She sees it pretty early on. Yeah.
Oh, did she? Because I didn't catch her seeing it. And so then See, the second time, and I should have watched for it, but I forgot to look for that. But I didn't see the blood drop. But in the very beginning, you see that mug as it pans to her at her house, and then at the end, she's on the balcony looking down on the Thrombies now.
Mhm.
And as she's holding that mug, Rian Johnson in the moment made that call. Like that wasn't like he went to that mug. It wasn't like it was written in there. It was like, hey, this would work. Let's do this. And so he had that mug, and then she's holding it just to where it says my house, and she's covering up the other parts. But it says my house. And we return back to the mug that was established early in the movie. And so it's a great way of setting something up in the beginning, and then you come back to it at the end. It's the punchline setup.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great way. That mug was an absolute wonderful closing for that.
I didn't realize that. I would have assumed that was in there the whole time, but yeah, it's a great payoff for sure. Some other cool props in this one. You have Harlan's letter to Linda about Richard cheating on her. It's got like the invisible ink, which is that's a very cool prop and very much a murder mystery type of thing. You get up in there. Blanc's coin, which is interesting how he's kind of distracting people with that. Doing some. Marta has that magnet, that big old clunky magnet to try and erase the videotape, which is awesome too, because it's a videotape that they have of her trying to get it leave and then come back. And then of course, they have the there's a couple of things. I forgot this one. Marta has that cracked screen on her phone.
Yes, the whole
characterization all over that, right? It's like she can't even afford a decent phone. Which is fun. And then you have that, of course, that stage prop knife, which is massively important because she'd be dead otherwise.
Well, and that's the other part. They set it up because I thought you would think to yourself, wait, all of a sudden of this whole knife thing, one of them is a prop knife. But Harlan himself mentions in the beginning when he's holding the actual knife he slits his throat with about he's talking about a prop knife, and then he sticks that one in the table because it's real. And so, it sets up that there's going to be a prop knife at the end. And so that when you do get the prop knife, it's not just a throwaway comment that Harlan made. It's oh my gosh, that's the one prop knife that looks real out of the whole thing. So real that Chris Evans grabs it off the circle of knives.
Yeah. Anything else for setting and design before we move down to characters and see if we missed anything?
No, except I think if any viewers watching it, I tell you, there's so many details. Don't get lost in just looking for them. You're gonna see some, but it's like I said, it's one of those movies you have to go back and you'll rewatch it, and you'll catch a few more details next time. But
yeah. So characters, Daniel Craig doing the Southern accent is fantastic. I buy it. Like it's legitimately good. It's such a great accent, and he kind of sounds like an idiot. What is that line Chris Evans says, like CSI KFC?
Chris Evans could be so sarcastic,
so mean.
But and I think there are the level of casting. First off, in this, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Johnson, Chris Evans. I mean, every one of these characters is an incredible level of talent. Yeah. And then to bring them all in and get them so incredibly pulled together for this, to have a little bit of venom against each other, and Michael Shannon, which, by the way, I'm going to say, I'm going to highlight, okay, Daniel Craig, his accent, absolutely top notch. Chris Evans, sarcasm, top notch. Let's talk about Michael Shannon. He's a favorite of mine anyway. I love him in Superman. I always loved that movie. But he is kind of this damaged character, but he does not kind of show a creepiness to him until he's in the hallway with her. Mm-hmm. And then you see a level of Michael Shannon that's just a little bit almost intimidating and threatening. And so, like you said, it's just this level of talent for all these characters, and for, and then you go back to Daniel Craig's accent, just how he pulls that off.
Yeah, he uses a similar accent in Logan Lucky. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's another one. We should look at that at some time. It's Steven Soderbergh, the guy who made the Ocean's 11 movies, and it's kind of like a redneck Ocean's 11. It's actually really, really good. That's a quick little plug for that. Christopher Plummer too, like underrated as Harlan Thrombey. It's not a big role, but it's a super important one, and he's just so, you love this guy. Like you feel bad for this guy that he has this family that's just money grubbing, and he's a man of integrity. He's just like, he finds, these injustices that people are doing, and he just cuts them off. Like, nope, you're double dipping from me, Joni. I'm cutting you off. Like them's the breaks. That's how it works.
Speaking of another talent, small part, Jordan Gordon-Levitt. Joseph Gordon-Levitt had a cameo in here. He gets a lot of cameos in some of Rian Johnson's movies, but he was on the TV yelling when they go to Marta's apartment, and the very first line after we know what happened, "You killed him," is on the TV. And the gal's watching, her sister or whoever's watching the TV, and says, "You killed him." And so it's like, oh my gosh, kind of just says right there. And then, but Joseph Gordon-Levitt was on there. He was one of the guys in that character for whatever fake show they had.
Yeah, that was a great little moment too, where you're kind of bringing you in. You're like, is this what's actually happening? No, it reminds us of what's actually happening. Yeah. Frank Oz in the movie too, as the lawyer. As Alan Stevens, who takes a lot of crap from the Trombies. "You're useless. You can go," or whatever he says.
That was a great line. There's small little lines like that are just great. Just little comments. "You're useless." Yeah. Okay, I can go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and I always love Emmett Walsh. He's a tiny little party man. He's looking old in this. He's the security guard with the videotape, but he's just always fun. He kind of elevates everything that he's in.
And he was originally going to be given to Ricky Jay, who was a friend of Rian Johnson, but passed away right before the movie. So Emmett Walsh is a great part for that.
Yeah. For Hero's Journey, which would be the next thing we have down there, I just wrote nope, because it's not that type of story at all. It's really just like, let's reveal like the badness of all these people, how corrupt all of the Trombies are. Which is the ride. That's the fun of it.
Yeah, it's not a hero's journey, but it is a incredible whodunit murder mystery, Sherlock Holmes, which they drop a Sherlock Holmes reference in there. So it just is there's a part where Daniel Craig says, "The game is afoot, eh, Watson?" So it acknowledges where they're at.
Self-aware, absolutely. Under world building, I really just like, it feels like our world. It doesn't feel like there's anything in this that could not happen. I mean, it's definitely an exaggeration of a lot of things, but it just feels, it's self-contained, but it's also a little quirky, but not overly so.
Yeah, no, I think the world building it's a great set for it's the setting behind it and everything, the world building that they have for this secluded place and all these people, and then even bringing in some of the real political debates and things that they have that are current in our time. I mean, it does set up a good world of this is existing right now.
All right. So final thoughts, Corey, on Knives Out.
Well, I think this movie is an absolute top-notch movie. Rian Johnson, who has received his fair share of fan hatred for Star Wars, and so things like that. But then when he goes and makes a movie like this, and you just look and you think, this is incredible. For him to have directed this, put all these characters together, built this great movie, this is a level of talent. He is an amazing director. This is an amazing movie. I think this is a movie that you have to watch. You have to realize you're going to be on detail overload. It's going to have some great twists, plot twists, turns, misleads. And I think, and there's some great humor mixed in. There are some perfect lines delivered perfectly by these cast members. And I think if you could summarize the whole movie, you could summarize it with the quote Daniel Craig gives, where he says, he's talking to Marta at the end, and she says, "You're not much of a detective." And he says, "Well, to be fair, you're not much of a murderer. Perhaps we deserve each other."
Yeah.
And that's a great line to summarize the plot of the movie.
For me, I wanted to say that the first time I watched this, I kind of thought that Marta's puking reaction to lying was kind of a cheat. But then they find that they don't use it nearly as much as I thought they were going to. And so I think they use it actually the exact right amount. And you get that nice payoff at the end where she lies about about the housekeeper not being dead and then pukes on Chris Evans,
Oh,
which is fun. Like it's just at the beginning, I think really just to kind of shorthand establish that like she's somebody we need to trust, which is fine. But the highest compliment that I can give this film is that I need to watch it again. I want to watch it again.
yeah.
You know, it's pretty much universally loved, and I want to see the sequel. I'm excited for that. I haven't seen it yet. It was nominated for best original screenplay, and somehow didn't win, which is really weird.
Hmm.
Some other just kind of random facts. The name, I don't know if you knew this, but the name is taken from a Radiohead song. Knives Out has nothing to do with that. But my favorite thing is, and I think I've read this, is that the name Harlan Thrombey comes from a choose your own adventure book called Who Killed Harlow Thrombey. I'm pretty sure I read that when I was a kid.
Oh, I didn't know that. I remember those choose your own adventure books.
I may have to go back and check that out.
The one Easter egg that I love that I drop in there is Danica McKellar is name dropped in this movie for a Hallmark movie, Deadly by Surprise, which is not a real movie.
Yeah.
And she actually tweeted a fake cover of a book, Deadly by Surprise. And so I'm kind of hoping that there's somehow, maybe she's in the sequel, like, because I haven't seen too much about the sequel. And so I'm kind of trying to stay away from it a little bit just because I want to go into this sequel. And like you said, this is the highest compliment. You want to watch this movie again. But I think there's another compliment is if this movie, you watch this before you go see the sequel and you go into the sequel with this fresh viewing thinking of all the things now that I got to pay attention to, small, subtle things that they did in this movie, I'm going to look for in the next movie.
So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. This is our last show of the year, so we'd like to take a minute to thank all the great people who supported us in various ways this year. Just to name a few: Dan Zare, Corey Clubb, Jeff McGee, Anthony King, Mary Purdue, Brian Young, Ian Desher, Aaron Harris, Thomas Riddle, Mike Pilot, Din from F105, Adam Bray, Dennis Keithley, Adam O'Brien, Colby Mead, Matt Rushing, David Jesse, Christopher J., Jonathan Marer, Greg McLaughlin, and David Motters. That's just to name a few. One last thing, our next episode is going to be a relaunch of the show. It'll be in January, and it'll be a discussion of our top 10 movie sequels of all time. And to celebrate our next phase of the show, we are going to do our first giveaway. We're giving away one digital copy of Avengers Age of Ultron. It's a sequel, people. Look for the pinned tweet on our Twitter profile and retweet and like the tweet to enter. Giveaway will end on 1/3/23, and the winner will be announced on the next episode of Reading Between the Reels. And if you'd like to contribute to that show, please send us an email or voicemail about your favorite movie sequels. We'll share it on the next episode.